All right, Stepan, you're on the line with Jimmy and Matt. Give it to us.
All right. Hello. So thank you first for having me here. I appreciate speakers and this channel called The Line. Now, in the poll, in the YouTube channel poll, I see, is it reasonable to believe in God? Most people answered no. So I'm kind of stressed out after that, but I'm gonna try anyways. So I want to visit.
Well, you're on a channel that that caters to a lot of atheists. So of course, the poll is going to skew that way. If you're getting ready to present a logical argument for the existence of God, I'm going to let you do it. And I'm in full-on Zen mode today, so you're in luck. But I want to let you know ahead of time that we're going to need to know how you're defining God.
Yeah.
That at some point is going to be important. Hang on, that at some point is going to be important, but I'm not going to say you have to necessarily start with that. So just be ready, because we're going to need to know what it is you're claiming exists, and then how you know it exists. That's it. Go for it.
Okay. So I'm going to define God first. So I would define God as the creator of the universe. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm fine with that as a description. The question then is, does that creator have intelligence and intent? Is it a thinking agent, or is it just merely a force?
Oh, okay. So let me be more specific. So it's a logical creator that necessarily exists.
Stepan, maybe this can cut through. Do you have a specific God you believe in? Are you a Christian or anything?
I don't necessarily have a specific God, but I would say best fits is Christian.
Okay. Do you believe that you can pray to the God that Matt is asking you about?
Pray?
Yeah.
I would say that doesn't matter, kind of.
Would he hear it if you tried?
Have I tried to pray? Yeah, I guess.
Okay, so you do believe in it, not just basically, I'm not necessarily asking about the prayer stuff. You're right. It's not that important. Is this an interactive God is the main question we were asking.
I would say is logical like human beings.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I asked if it was an agent. Anyway, go ahead with your proof.
Okay, so start with the question. I know it has been kind of answered by both deism and atheism. Was math invented or discovered? So I know atheism answers it as invented, correct?
Okay. Whether math was invented or discovered is potentially in dispute, but how is that relevant to a God?
Okay.
See, when we create an argument, when we create an argument, the premises of an argument are a major premise and a minor premise that are connected by the median term there. And so if I say math was invented, or if I say math was discovered, does only one of those lead to the conclusion that a God exists?
Okay, I want to say both lead to conclusion that God exists.
Then if both answers lead to the conclusion that a God exists, then the question's irrelevant, isn't it?
Is it though? Because
yes, that's literally the definition of irrelevant. If you're going to ask a question that has two possible answers and both answers lead to the same conclusion, then the question is irrelevant, because it doesn't matter if you start with invented, you get to God, and it doesn't matter if you start with discovered, you get to God. If you don't understand that how and why this question is irrelevant, I guarantee you the rest of this is not going to go well.
Okay, then let me approach it in a different way.
Okay.
So ask a different question. Is logic necessarily true?
So you keep asking questions, and all of your questions betray a confusion about the subjects. Logic isn't something that is true. Logic is the method that we use to analyze things. It may or may not produce truth, contingent on whether or not we have access to truth. So I thought you were calling in to prove that a God exists, and your first two attempts do not include the word God or the word exist. you can't get to the conclusion God exists unless one of those is in the first premise. So your question about logic is also irrelevant.
In fact, Stepan, I'm going to try and help you out here, because I see the thing that you are tempted to do, and it's very useful in churches. It's not useful in actual interactions with real atheists. Why don't you try to present your proof of God without asking a question?
Without asking a question, so I'll start that.
Yeah, that's how proofs work.
So logic is necessarily true. Since logic is necessarily true. Oh, wait. No, let me reiterate. So I'm gonna start with math is infinitely complex. Logic gave birth to math. Logic cannot be finite because it gave birth to something that's infinitely complex. So logic is also infinitely complex. If logic is infinitely and then another premise is logic is necessarily true. And since logic is necessarily true and it's infinitely complex, it couldn't have come to be randomly, like through evolution. So there must be a creator called God.
Okay, this is probably going to be... No, that argument makes no sense.
Correct.
It has a complete misunderstanding of virtually every term that you used.
Yes.
And it attempts to use infinity as a quantity, which is yet another problem. I
called evolution random and credited evolution for abiogenesis.
Yeah, I did my best to follow along, but there's absolutely nothing there that makes sense that I could say leads to anything even in the ballpark of a God exists.
Stepan, did evolution produce abiogenesis? Is abiogenesis a product of evolution?
Sorry, can you tell me what abiogenesis is?
The origin of life, which was what you said was from evolution.
So my saying that abiogenesis came to be randomly.
I'm asking you, the question I had is read to me again the premise you had that included the word evolution in it. Let me make sure I've got it right.
So evolution couldn't have come to... Okay, so logic couldn't have come from evolution because it's infinitely complex.
No, logic doesn't come from evolution because logic is a concept and evolution is a physical process having to do with matter.
I think you left something out too from when you read it the first time.
Did I?
Yes, because you didn't even use the word random in that. And there was something about, I thought the origin of life, but maybe I intuited that.
Maybe I said logic couldn't have come to be randomly through evolution.
Okay, fine.
Evolution is the process by which living things change. Evolution has nothing at all to do with logic or math, but also the fact that the foundations, logic, something like set theory or identity, lead to math isn't like logic birthing math or math being contingent. Mathematics are developed languages, just like the language of logic is developed, but the truth of the concepts that sit at the foundations there are discoveries. This is why, is it an invention? Is it a discovery? Well, how we use it and the language we use to work with it, that is the invention. The foundational truths of identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle, those are discoveries. But in neither case are they evolved things.
But I'm tempted to ask then again. Okay, I'm tempted to ask a question, which is, does rock have logic? And would that be no, right? Does a rock
have logic? I don't know what it means to have logic. That doesn't make sense.
Is it capable of rational thought?
I have no reason to think that a rock is capable of rational thought.
And
I'll even go so far as to say, I'll even go so far as to say right now that I am currently convinced that rocks are not capable of rational thought. How is that relevant to whether or not there's a God?
So basically, I'm saying, how could evolution come to be if it had to come to be from non-rational things?
Okay. So I asked about this because I wanted to know why it was relevant that a rock doesn't think. How is that relevant?
Okay, so I'm trying to say, since the rock doesn't think, right, and humans can think.
Yes, because they're different.
So where in the history of the world, when did that like change? How could it possibly change from being non-rational to rational?
When neural networks began to form that allowed more advanced processing of information.
Okay, so then wouldn't that make logic subjective?
So, Stepan, are you just randomly picking words out of the air and throwing them out there? Because whether or not logic is subjective, it's like we're not even speaking the same language. I'm answering your questions. You are continually demonstrating that you don't understand the subjects. And then when we get to a point, you're like, oh, and then you say something. Matter of fact, what you just said was so weird, I can't even remember it.
Whether logic, he asked if that makes logic subjective.
Yeah, if that makes logic subjective. Whether or not something is subjective or not, how is that relevant? You keep coming up with irrelevant things.
Yeah.
What is it you'd really like to say? You're convinced that there is a God. Why? Why are you convinced there's a God?
Okay, I guess I'm making a mistake here, assuming that logic should always be true. By logic, I mean logical reasoning.
So we already know that there's flawed reasoning. What you're talking about isn't logic. For example, there are in propositional logic, there are syllogisms and syllogistic forms. And we, thanks to Aristotle and his band of merry logicians, we've been able to go through every possible argument structure. They all have been labeled, categorized, and sorted into different groups. And there are some logical arguments, which we consider valid in structure, where if the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. And there are others where if the premises are true, the conclusion may or may not be true. And so the ones where it may or may not be true, we call those invalid forms. And the arguments where there's a valid structure are valid forms. Once you get a valid form, that means you can stick true premises in, and the conclusion must be true. If you reject the conclusion while accepting the premises, you are being colloquially illogical, unreasonable, irrational, etc. But logic isn't true, and that syllogism isn't true. The syllogistic form doesn't care about the content. You could say premise one is the sky is blue. And depending on how you define those words in those terms, we might both agree the sky is blue. And then you go to the next premise, dogs are blue. And we might agree dogs are blue. And then we say, therefore, the sky is a dog. Now, we already know that that syllogistic structure is invalid. There's no reason to think the conclusion is true, whether the premises are true or not. So I'd highly recommend that you spend some time going out and studying the basics of syllogisms to find out what you're talking about. Because when you just say, logic has to be true all the time, and I don't see how that's possible without a God, all you're doing is saying, I don't know what logic is, I don't understand this subject, and therefore I'm going to throw up my hands and say it must be a God.
Oh, okay. I understand. Yeah, I'll go do more research on that.
I have a question that hopefully, I don't know if it'll be quick or not, but so you've come to the conclusion that you do believe there is a God based on whatever, all the stuff we've just talked about and pointed out the flaws in. But beyond that, let's just say you came up with something and did get to a deistic proposition that there has to be some God. You did tell us at the beginning that you are most compatible with Christianity. How do you get from that establishment of, I think that there is a God, and then I think that that God is the Christian God?
So if there is a God, so what I want to do is basically prove that God exists and he's logical, because logic would be necessarily true. And it would make sense, since God would be logical then, it would make sense that he would have showed us or provided some kind of information about him. And
Why? Wait. Why?
Okay.
Thinking about the vastness of the universe, I assume you're not a young Earth creationist. You don't think that the universe is small and that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. So thinking about the vastness of the universe and the absolute potential of the universe with how much energy is present in the universe and everything, why is it more reasonable to believe that a God who can create a universe would in any way communicate with only one species of living beings, but apparently not dogs, not cats, not whales, not anything else, and potentially not any other alien species, regardless of their relevant intelligence? Why is it more reasonable to believe in a God that would give one species some information about his existence than to believe in, say, a God who created the universe kind of as a project to see if he could, as he was building with Legos, but actually has no regard for any of the things within it?
Okay, I guess when you ask that, I see kind of my flaws, but the way I would say is that only, so far that we know of, only humans are able of logical thought that brings awareness.
How do you know that only humans are capable of, do you mean on Earth only humans are capable of logical thought?
No, so far that we know of. That's
Okay.
what I would say.
So you're talking about in the almost the number 0, in every conceivable way rounds to 0% of the universe that we've observed. We've only found humans capable of doing this task, even though those humans are actually also creating machines capable of doing those tasks, but whatever. Only humans capable of doing those tasks. As far as we know, also alive today, because we don't even know that there weren't species before us that couldn't have done something like that. It's very unlikely they developed the level of civilization we did, if they did exist. But again, even if that was true, why would it necessitate a God like the God I presented you if evolution is capable of creating logically considerate humans? Why does that necessitate a God also? Why does that necessitate also a God who is personal, like the Christian God, as opposed to a totally impersonal God?
I guess it doesn't.
Correct. And this is why, so this was when I had that low blood sugar that one day. I flipped out, and Matt had to calm me down and gave me a talking to after the show. He was very nice. It wasn't a real talking to, but he was like, "Hey man, are you better?" I was getting so frustrated that we had like 4 Christian callers that day that we never got past deism on. That was what I lost my shit over, where it's literally like, how, even if we gave you this, how do you get from there to there? And Stepan, as you've just addressed, you can't. So please, Matt gave you some things to consider. I've given you some things to consider now. Please go to those considerings and call us back.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stepan.
Sweet. Thanks.
It's funny because it is still a thing that bugs me, but that day was the day where I threw a little bit of a fit. I needed some crackers. I'm not kidding, because I haven't had a significant meal today, but I was doing the show. I have 2 packages of peanut butter crackers if I feel like I'm getting moody again.
I don't currently have a snack up here, but I've got a snack in the other room that can go get me a snack.
That's the super snack.
It's genuinely difficult because you try. Trust me, I don't mind being pedantic when I think it's called for. And I don't mind being, pointing out the ridiculousness of things on occasion. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years on these shows, or almost. Oh, actually, this week marks, I think, exactly 20 years. March 13th of 2004. Or no, that was probably 2005. And so it would have been in December 2000. So there's 19 years. But in any case, the point I was getting to is that you could, as you were pointing out, concede all these things about a deistic kind of God, and it wouldn't get you anywhere near Christianity or Islam or Scientology or whatever they're going to advocate for. But deism, and I know there's a call, so I'm going to avoid getting into it, is also problematic. But at the end of the day, it would be nice to get people to defend what it is they actually believe. But when you start hearing things like, is math invented or discovered? And as it turns out, that's completely irrelevant to the discussion. And then is logic true? Well, no. Statements that have accessible truth values may be considered true. This gets into philosophical things about what access to truth we have, and how do you beat hard solipsism? And so at the end of the day, what we're really saying about logic is that we know, as I was pointing out, which syllogistic forms will produce truth from truth. And more importantly, it's not that this form produces truth. It's about your rationality. And if you accept the premises of a logically valid argument and reject the conclusion, you are irrational, just definitionally irrational on that particular issue. And so the world is complicated and there's a bunch of stuff to know. And so when somebody calls in and is saying, hey, is logic true? There's a heavy sigh and everything else, because okay, let me try and figure out what this person understands and what they've been led to misunderstand in order to get down this particular path. And there are people like, oh, no, why can't you just answer the question? Why can't you just answer? Because it's not. It's not. If I ask, do you have a mechanism to X? That's a question where you get, there's a yes or a no. You either have a mechanism or you don't. If you say, is logic true or not? You are asking a question that does not make sense. Right. It's like, I can't even come up with an example. It's so absurd.
I think in listening to you talk about it and knowing it's come up before, I think from now on, if I get that question, my response is going to be, please define the logic hypothesis, because there isn't really one. And that's where I think it will become a little bit, maybe that a person would go, right, okay, I now see the flaw in what I am suggesting, because there isn't a hypothesis of logic.
Is a calculator true?
Right. Right.
Is my screwdriver true?
Okay.
You got to be careful.
True. Yeah. Okay. You already know.
You and I we're both woodworkers, so we're getting ready to go down the same path on true, but
a screwdriver can be true.
It's just too much fun. You tie it on a string and hang it from the ceiling. You get it true.
Did you get it true? I mean, yeah, or just do this, and if you see no bend, that'd be pretty true screwdriver.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jimmy Snow. I'm the executive producer of The Line, and at night I sneak into Matt Dillahunty's house and I trade his cereals for other cereals. He comes out and he's like, wait, these are cereals I buy, but I swear I had different cereals. Anyway, would you like to support this channel or any specific show? You can do so over on Patreon or in channel memberships. There are special tiers for special shows or for the channel at large, and it helps us expand programming as well as hopefully very soon launch it in podcast form. Now, also, if you'd like to support, you can you can subscribe, you can leave a comment or a super thanks, which is a special highlighted comment that you pay for. Those are fun. And, screw the algorithm, go check out something over here, I suppose. Boy, I hope I can still put those icons there, because if I can't, this is going to look really stupid. I'm going to go buy some Cocoa Puffs and switch out Matt's mini wheats now.